We didn't know what we were doing when we landed on Cirellon. Not really. Earth had just broken into deep space travel a few decades ago, and our maps were still being scribbled in pencil, so to speak. Cirellon wasn't even supposed to be inhabited, at least not according to the Centauri Accord's star charts. But it was, and not by just any species. The Vari were there. To most of the galaxy, the Vari were myths, dead, extinct, stories told to scare young aliens into obedience. They were once called the Keepers of the Eternal Tongue, the Songborn, the rulers of the Thousand Sectors. That was until they vanished, consumed by what historians guessed was internal decay and spiritual collapse. So imagine our surprise when our scout ship, the Dogma's Edge, sent back a transmission. Ruins covered in strange symbols, and living beings that didn't match any known species. At first, the Galactic Council laughed at us. Humans were new, loud, and always chasing stories like we were trying to prove something. The idea that we had found living Vari, or something connected to them, was hilarious to them. They joked that we probably mistook rocks for ruins and shadows for aliens. But we knew what we saw. Our team, a crew of 10, half scientists, half security, landed on Cirellon with hearts pounding and minds racing. The air was breathable, thick with humidity, and there was a strange vibration in it, like sound trying to take form. The ground itself seemed to hum under our boots. And those symbols? They weren't just carved. They were alive. Glowing, singing, almost, but too low for the ear to catch. At the center of the ruins stood a dome, black as night, built from a material that didn't reflect light, didn't register on our instruments, and didn't look like anything made in this universe. Inside it were statues, ancient and towering, beings with faces like lions and wings made of crystal. They stood silent, heads bowed, arms outstretched as if offering something we couldn't understand. Then there were the locals, not Vari, not really, but changed by them. A smaller, hunched race with violet eyes and silver skin. They called themselves Nal. They didn't speak in words, but in harmonies, notes strung together like sentences. Our translators failed. Our universal comms blanked out. But one thing kept happening over and over. They pointed at us, more specifically at me, Alex Rourke, and hummed a single rising tone that made the statue's eyes glow faintly. The scientists thought it was just a reaction to sound frequencies. I didn't, because when they hummed, I heard words, not with my ears, with something deeper, in my chest, in my bones, like a memory that wasn't mine. They said, "The blood of old walks again." I didn't tell the others. Not then. I just nodded and played along as the mission leader, Dr. Janeth Hahn, took samples and clicked photos. I smiled when the Nal offered us fruits that sang when bitten, and when the walls of the temple shimmered with the breath of ancient wind. But I couldn't stop thinking about that feeling. Like I knew this place, like these ruins weren't just ruins. They were waiting. On the third night, I found an old chamber below the dome. Alone. No lights, just that deep vibration in the air. There were carvings on the walls, and when I touched them, my fingers lit up with golden lines. My voice, my actual voice, started humming, like my throat was no longer mine. And I chanted something. Words I had never learned, but they poured from me as if I'd known them for lifetimes. The hymns of the Vari kings. The statues outside woke up. And across the galaxy, the other species who once ruled and mocked us felt it. The Vari were back, and they were singing through us. Everything changed after that night. The others didn't believe me when I told them what happened. I didn't blame them. If I hadn't felt it crawling through my veins, I probably wouldn't believe it either. I told Janeth and the rest of the crew about the hidden chamber, the carvings, the golden light, the hymn that forced itself from my throat. She just looked at me like I'd gone space mad. Sleep deprivation, she said. Maybe even exposure to some alien pollen. You've been off since we landed. But she couldn't explain the tremor in the earth that followed, or how the sky had shifted slightly, like the stars themselves were leaning in to listen. Or how the temple's entrance, which had remained closed since we arrived, slowly opened on its own the next morning. The Nal were waiting outside, all of them kneeling. I remember stepping out of my tent, groggy and angry, thinking maybe it was another weird ritual. But they weren't bowing to the temple. They were bowing to me. All of them, their violet eyes dimmed with reverence, their silvery hands placed flat against their chests. I'd never seen anything so humbling or terrifying. Janeth tried speaking to them again, but they wouldn't answer her. They only sang to me. And when they did, my head started pounding with memories that weren't mine. A throne room in a mountain made of light, armies of beasts kneeling in formation, a voice, deep and metallic, whispering across galaxies. It was too much. I collapsed. When I woke up, they had brought me into the temple. The dome above glowed with symbols I could now read. It wasn't language, not in the traditional sense. It was music made physical, script born from vibration. I reached up and touched one of the symbols, and suddenly I knew its meaning. Resurrection. The temple wasn't just a place of worship. It was a machine, a spiritual engine, one designed to awaken something ancient and something terrifying. That's when I realized the Nal weren't worshipping me because they thought I was some prophet. They believed I was a key, a living descendant of the Vari bloodline, left behind when the last of their kings vanished into stardust. A spark. I didn't know how to feel. I was just some kid from Mars Colony 7, a dropout who stumbled his way into xenoarchaeology because I couldn't stand working under domes all my life. I wasn't a king. I wasn't special. But the temple thought otherwise. We stayed for 2 more days while the rest of the crew continued with their documentation. But something had changed in the air. The Nal kept their distance from the others now. They stopped sharing food. They wouldn't respond to anyone except me. One of the security guys, Brenner, started getting paranoid. "This whole place gives me the creeps," he muttered during watch. "Those freaks stare at you like you're God, and the minute you're gone, they shut down, like puppets, like something's controlling them." He wasn't wrong. They were puppets, but not in the way he thought. They were conduits, living echoes of a time when sound and will ruled the stars. The Vari had created them to maintain this world, to keep the hymns alive until the bloodline returned. Until I returned. That night, the stars blinked red, not twinkling, blinking, rhythmic, a signal, and every Nal in the village began to sing at once, a low, heavy chant, rolling through the ground, shaking our bones, bringing the statues back to life one by one, not fully alive, more like aware, watching. Janeth tried to stop them. She panicked. She ordered Brenner and the rest to secure the perimeter and demanded I put an end to it. I told her I couldn't, because the hymns weren't a song anymore. They were a command, and whatever had been sleeping here for millennia was finally listening. Janeth kept trying to hold the team together, but it was obvious she'd lost control. Every member of the expedition was shaken, some physically ill from the endless humming that vibrated through the temple walls, others mentally fraying around the edges from lack of sleep and sheer confusion. But not me. I felt clearer than ever. It wasn't like I understood everything. The language of the Vari wasn't just speech or thought. It was a feeling. And the more I opened myself to it, the more it responded. Words hummed in my chest. Symbols on the wall pulsed when I passed. I could hear the memories of the stone itself, like a ghost of the past reaching out through sound. The Nal began constructing something just outside the temple gates. It wasn't with tools, and it wasn't with effort. They sang it into existence. With synchronized notes and vibrating chants, stones lifted and shaped themselves, air solidified into thin sheets of crystal, and a tower began to rise. When Janeth saw it, she lost it. "This is insane! You can't honestly believe this is okay. We're supposed to observe, not awaken ancient space gods." I didn't know how to explain to her that it was already too late. Whatever we had triggered wasn't going to stop just because we packed our bags and left. And then came the fleet. Not human, not Vari. Galactic Council emissaries. 3 ships, sleek and silver, floating above the ruins like silent judges. They'd intercepted our emergency pings, and apparently someone back on Earth had leaked the findings. The Council couldn't risk humans being the first species to reactivate something like this, especially not alone. They demanded to land, to investigate, to take control of the site under the Precursor Artifact Act. Janeth agreed before I could even argue, so the diplomats and observers arrived, dressed in their ceremonial robes and pretending to care about cultural preservation. There were 3 species: Elari, with their glassy eyes and smooth, almost featureless faces; Vortans, big and scaled, always sneering; and the Perun, floating jellyfish who clicked and blinked light to communicate. They stepped into the ruins like tourists. But I knew they were afraid. They recognized the architecture, the energy, the resonance. And most of all, they recognized me. The Elari delegate approached me with forced calm. "You must stop this. You don't understand what you're awakening. The Vari were not kings. They were tyrants." "They were gods," I said quietly. "And they're coming back." The delegate looked almost pained. "You're being used. That blood in you, it's dangerous. It's corrupted. That's why we buried this world. Why we erased its name from the star maps." I stared at him. "You were afraid of them." He didn't deny it. That night they tried to kill me. 3 Vortan soldiers crept into my quarters. Silenced weapons. No warning. Just a clean execution. But the temple reacted before they got close. A wall of light erupted from the floor, throwing them across the room. Their weapons melted in their hands. And in the corner, one of the statues, its eyes still dim, turned ever so slightly to face them. The message was clear. I wasn't alone. The Council emissaries claimed it was a malfunction, a misunderstanding. They withdrew their men and apologized. But the damage was done. The Null hissed at them now, refused to sing in their presence. Even Janeth, after seeing what happened, stopped trying to de-escalate. She pulled me aside. "What are you becoming, Alex?" I didn't have an answer, because I didn't feel like just me anymore. I was remembering too much. Things I never lived, things that weren't human. Wars fought with sound. Thrones that floated above oceans of silence. Betrayals etched in melody. The death of an empire that refused to be forgotten. And then, a vision. A star, a prison, a gate, locked with a final hymn. And I knew the temple wasn't the only one. There were others, across the stars, sleeping, waiting for the hymns to find them. And now we had started the chorus. The Council ships left orbit the next day. They didn't say much, didn't offer explanations, no farewells. They just cut contact, powered up, and jumped to light speed, vanished like ghosts too scared to admit what they'd just seen. But their silence said everything. They were afraid, not just of the Vari returning, but of us, the humans who could bring them back. Janeth tried to send one last message to Earth before their comms blackout kicked in. I don't know what she said, or if it even got through. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. Because something had already answered us. And it wasn't from Earth. That same night, the tower the Null had sung into existence finished itself with a final chord that cracked the sky. A beam of sound. Not light, sound shot upward into the atmosphere, pulsing with golden glyphs and impossible frequencies. It was beautiful and violent. You could feel it inside your bones, vibrating every molecule until you wanted to scream or sing or both. I did neither. Instead, I stood beneath it, surrounded by Nal, as the tower sent its message into space, and deep inside, I understood what it said. A call to all surviving Vari constructs, a summons to all forgotten temples, a challenge to all who had buried the past. The blood has returned. The chorus begins again. Across the galaxy, those ancient places, lost, sealed, erased, began to wake up. We didn't know it yet, but on the desolate moon of Jira, a vault opened for the first time in 10,000 years. On the burning world of Ilarkan, a desert storm began to whisper the names of kings. And in the ruins of a long-dead space station orbiting Theta Prime, a derelict Vari archive blinked back to life. One by one, they responded to the hymn, and the galaxy trembled. But while the stars stirred, things on Sirelion got worse. Brenner was the first to snap. He'd never trusted the Null, never liked the singing, and after the Council's failed assassination attempt, he was convinced I'd gone full dictator, possessed or worse. He pulled a weapon on me during breakfast, told Janeth she could either sedate me or help him end it. She didn't move. So he fired. I didn't dodge, I didn't need to. The air caught the bullet mid-flight, literally froze it. It hung in front of me like a drop of water suspended in 0G, then turned to ash. Behind me, the ground split open, and from it rose a second statue, one we hadn't seen before. Different, smaller, faster. A guardian. It didn't attack Brenner. It just stood between us and sang. One long, flat note that made the trees outside wither and the sky dim. Brenner collapsed, eyes bleeding, mouth open in a scream he never finished. Janeth was crying. Not out of fear, at least not entirely. "Alex," she whispered, voice shaking, "do you even know what you're doing?" I didn't. But I knew why I was doing it. Because the galaxy had lied. All of them. The Council, the archives, the stories. They made the Vari out to be monsters, tyrants, destroyers. But what I was remembering didn't feel like tyranny. It felt like reclamation. The Vari hadn't fallen. They had been betrayed. Silenced. Their hymns twisted into warnings. Their temples buried under fear. And now we were bringing them back. Whether the galaxy wanted it or not. The first wave of panic didn't come from us. It came from them. The Galactic Council went into lockdown within days of the beam's pulse. We didn't have direct access to the interstellar networks anymore, but Janeth hacked a fragment of a subspace feed, just enough to catch the headlines echoing across civilized space. Unclassified precursors detected in outer sectors. Varitech awakens on multiple worlds. Human involvement confirmed. Council condemns Earth's silence. Is this the return of the Songborn? They were scared. Not just the bureaucrats, the people, the species that had built their entire civilizations on the ashes of forgotten gods were suddenly being haunted by their hymns. Some colonies reported voices in the wind. Others claimed their own monuments had begun to hum with invisible energy. A mining outpost was entirely abandoned after every worker there reported the same dream. Of a crown of stars and a human face singing in a tongue they'd never heard, yet somehow understood. They called it the Chorus Plague. But it wasn't a plague, it was truth. And once it was heard, it couldn't be unheard. Here on Sirelion, the tower pulsed slower now. Its work was done. The signal had been sent, the call answered. And yet things didn't settle. They shifted. Janeth and I barely spoke anymore. Not because of hostility, but because she didn't recognize me anymore. I didn't either. My voice had changed. Not the tone, but the texture. the way it carried. When I spoke, people listened. Not just heard, listened, like every word mattered. And sometimes I didn't even have to speak at all. One morning I stepped outside, and a Nal child ran to me, singing a note I'd never heard before. I knelt and placed a hand on his chest, and he froze. Not in fear, in revelation. Later, Janeth would tell me that same boy had been mute since birth. The hymns were healing them, or remaking them. Same thing, really. But of course, the council didn't see it that way. They came back. But this time, it wasn't diplomats. It was warships. 5 of them. No warning. No demands. They just appeared in orbit, and within hours they started dropping containment drones onto the surface. They didn't want a negotiation. They wanted control. And if they couldn't have that, they'd burn everything down. We tried to stop them. I stood at the edge of the temple, arms open, singing the opening lines of the first morning. A hymn meant for peace, for stillness. The Null joined in. Even Janeth, shaken but believing now, whispered the words beside me. It worked. For a moment the drones froze in the air, their weapons powered down. Even the warships above flickered like their AI cores were choking on static. But then someone on their end overrode it. The drones fell, and they opened fire. Null screamed. Stone shattered. Parts of the temple cracked open like broken ribs. I watched 3 of them, Elder Keepers, the ones who'd first shown me the chamber, get turned to dust before I could even move. I screamed. But it wasn't grief that came out. It was sound. Ancient, violent, unwritten. A hymn not meant for life, not meant for healing. A wrath song. The tower answered it. A pulse of golden force exploded from its peak, ripping through the sky like a banshee's cry. The drones shattered mid-air. The warships blinked red and spiraled, systems failing, weapons folding inward, AI cores melting under the pressure of a sound older than math. 3 of them crashed into the ocean. 2 limped away. Janeth stood behind me, hand over her mouth. "You killed them," she whispered. "No," I said. "The hymn did. And it was only just beginning. The universe doesn't stay silent for long." After the hymn of wrath shattered the sky and sent those warships tumbling from orbit like wounded birds, everything shifted. Not just on Cirellon, but everywhere. It started with whispers. We intercepted fragments of distress signals and encoded messages, leaked from council channels and pirate comms alike. One of the Vari temples on Elarkon had obliterated a council research team. On the jungle moon of Riveka, an entire forest began to sing in unison, its flora swaying to an invisible rhythm. Then there was the asteroid outpost on Denkari 4, where reports said an old mining AI had begun broadcasting songs in a dead language, compelling even the machines to kneel. All of it led back to one conclusion. The chorus was alive. And the galaxy was dividing itself in response. Some species, those who had once suffered under the old order, started to remember. Their oral histories, long buried beneath shame and lies, began to sound a lot less like myths. Whole sectors went dark. Ships disappeared. Local governments collapsed under the pressure of ancient truths rising from the ruins. And then the messages started arriving. Not from the council, from others. Unaligned factions, rogue scholars, warlords, believers. One in particular caught Janeth's attention. A signal from a fringe planet orbiting a red dwarf in the Shikari Drift. It was short, heavily encrypted, and barely translated by our tech. But the message was clear. The second hymn is known to us. The last choir still breathes. We are waiting for the blood. I didn't know what the last choir was. Not yet. But the way the temple on Cirellon hummed when we played that message back told me everything I needed. It was real. And they were calling me. Janeth sat beside me that night, watching the stars flicker above the damaged tower. The air was thick with smoke and static from the earlier assault. But the ruins still stood, still pulsing with life beneath the broken stone. "You could stop this," she said softly. "You still have a choice. You could walk away. Let it all fade again." I looked at her, and I think part of me wished I could say yes, but I couldn't. "I'm not starting something," I told her. "I'm finishing it." She nodded like she understood, but I could see the pain behind her eyes. She didn't want me to go, but she knew there was no stopping it. The Vari didn't leave heirs. They left keys, and I was one of them. The next morning, the Nal finished building the vessel, if you could even call it that. It didn't have engines in the traditional sense. No metal hull, no fuel cells. It was grown, sung into shape from crystal and memory. A living ship, responsive, aware, and completely tethered to the hymns. It answered to me. Janeth gave me a small transmitter, just in case. "So you can talk to us," she said, "or come back, if there's ever a place for you here again." I took it, even though we both knew I wouldn't need it. The Nal sang as I stepped onto the vessel, their voices low and harmonic. Not a goodbye, but a blessing. A promise. The ship rose without sound, its form shimmering against the morning light. No flames, no roar, just a whisper through space and sky. As we breached the upper atmosphere, I looked back down at Cirelon, its ruins, its secrets, its songs, a place the Council had tried to erase, and yet it endured. Then I turned forward. Ahead of me, the stars shifted. Not randomly, deliberately, as if rearranging themselves for a path that hadn't been walked in 10,000 years. The hymns weren't just music, they were coordinates. And I was no longer just a man. I was the voice of the forgotten kings. Space felt different when the stars listened to you. I didn't steer the ship. It knew where to go. Each time the hymns whispered in my chest, a new course was set. No coordinates, no navigation systems, just sound, resonance, memory. We drifted through slipstreams and star lanes long abandoned, through black sectors and voids where time itself bent like cloth pulled too tight. The ship sang softly as it moved. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The notes it carried were old and patient, like someone humming to themselves in a room full of ghosts. And I listened. I listened because the deeper we went, the more I remembered. The hymns weren't just ancient songs. They were lived experiences embedded in my blood. I began to dream while I was awake. I saw the golden halls of the first Vari sanctum, felt the heat of the flame choir burning in orbit around dying stars. I remembered leading armies that didn't breathe, commanding living symphonies in battle, and standing over galaxies we didn't conquer. We composed them. But even kings fall. One night, or whatever passed for night aboard the ship, I heard the first dissonant chord. It came from deep space, like a siren wailing underwater, ugly, broken, like a song sung by a dying throat. The ship jolted, not physically but emotionally. It hurt. The hymns responded. A ripple of grief passed through the ship's walls. We had crossed into something else. The grave path. It wasn't a place mapped by any known system. It was something the Vari had kept hidden, maybe even from themselves. A pocket of reality where discarded creations, broken guardians, and failed experiments were left to decay in silence. But someone, or something, was singing again. As we drifted into the grave path, the stars grew fewer, colder. The light faded until even our own glow felt intrusive. And then I saw it. A structure. It wasn't a temple, it was a tomb. Massive, twisted, shaped like a spine bent in agony, orbiting a dead sun. Around it floated the debris of forgotten wars, ships ripped apart, bones of creatures too large to be real, fragments of Vari tech half singing in static. And then I heard them. Not Vari, not Council, something older. The Dissonant. They were the reason the Vari vanished. Not the Council, not some internal collapse. The Vari had sealed themselves away to keep the Dissonant from spreading. The Dissonant were sound made wrong. Noise turned against creation. They had no form, only voices. No flesh, only echoes. Their purpose was to unmake, not destroy, but rewrite. They turned songs of order into chaos, turned beauty into suffering. They had once sung the stars backward until light itself refused to shine. And now, they had heard me. The ship shook. Not violently, but in fear. It tried to turn back, but I placed my hand on its core. "No," I whispered. "We go forward." It obeyed. Reluctantly. Inside the tomb, I saw them. Flickers in the air, like smoke learning how to speak. They didn't attack. They surrounded me, whispered my name, not with reverence, but with mockery. The blood returns. The choir bleeds again. "Shall we sing, little king?" I could feel them clawing at my thoughts, pulling memories apart, trying to twist my voice, to make me forget the melodies, to turn my hymns into screams. But I didn't scream. I sang. Not a hymn of power, a hymn of remembrance. The same melody the Nile child sang to me back on Cirelon. It rang through the tomb like a golden bell, cutting through the dissonant like light through smoke. They hissed, wailed, vanished one by one. The tomb shifted, a chamber opened, and inside it sat a figure, not alive, not dead, dressed in Vari armor, face hidden behind a golden mask cracked with age. He didn't move, but I knew him. Vari royalty, the first composer, the origin of the hymns, and on his chest, embedded in glass and bone, pulsed the second hymn. The chamber was so silent, I forgot what breathing sounded like. The first composer sat motionless, his body entombed in golden armor dulled with centuries of sleep. Or perhaps death. Time didn't flow here. It hung, stale and waiting, like even time itself respected him enough not to intrude. His mask, once polished to a mirror finish, was now cracked, tarnished, worn from age or maybe regret. Beneath it, I could feel a presence, not alive in any way I could explain, but awake. Watching, I stepped closer. Each footfall echoed like a cannon blast in the stillness. Around me, the tomb whispered. Fragments of melody brushed my ears. Unfinished songs, half-formed memories, the cries of galaxies long dead. The dissonant had tried to erase this place, but something stronger had fought back and sealed it off. This room, this body, this moment. This was the Vari's last note. The second hymn wasn't just a song. It wasn't a key like the first. It was a memory too dangerous to remember. And yet here I was, its rightful bearer, the blood that refused to die. The composer didn't speak with words. He didn't move. But I felt him in my bones, a vibration that worked through my marrow, tuning me like an instrument. You carry the echo of kings, but echoes fade. I didn't answer aloud. I didn't need to. My thoughts were already part of the room. I am more than an echo. He let that sit in the silence for a moment. Then the room pulsed. Then carry more. Carry all. And that's when it hit me. The second hymn wasn't a song to be sung. It was a burden, a vault of every forgotten Vari memory, every emotion, every triumph, every failure, every betrayal, locked away after the final war, encoded into melody, stored within the composer's failing body. Because they knew. They knew they couldn't win. Not against the dissonant, not against the fear and chaos that twisted creation's song into noise. So they did the only thing left. They buried the memory of what they were, hoping that one day, when the dissonant rose again, someone would rise too. Someone who still had their voice. I reached out. My hand trembled as it touched the chest of the composer, where the crystal pulsed like a heartbeat, slowed by centuries. The second my fingers touched it, everything shattered. Not outside, inside, I saw it all. The rise of the Vari, born not of conquest but of harmony. Their cities weren't built. They grew like flowers shaped by will and song. They didn't rule by fear, but by resonance. They found the music in every species and wove it into their own. But then the dissonance began. A single Vari broke the scale. He crafted a new kind of sound, one not in tune with the universe but against it. It was brilliant, bold, and entirely wrong. It corrupted, it bent minds, it made stars scream, and it spread. The dissonant were born not of another species, but of the Vari's own hubris. Their end was self-made, and so to stop it they sealed their knowledge away. They abandoned their power. They vanished from memory not by accident, but by choice. Until me. Until we, humans, came along, young and stupid and loud, too stubborn to know what not to touch. And now, the vault was open again. The memories poured into me like fire through ice, burning and freezing everything I was. For a moment, I thought I'd die, that my mind would split under the weight of it all. But I didn't, because humans are stubborn. We don't break easy, we don't surrender to fear, and we're loud enough to shake the stars. I opened my eyes. The composer was gone, dissolved, freed. The crystal on his chest had fused into mine, its glow now pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The second hymn wasn't hidden anymore. It was alive. In me. And the dissonant felt it. They screamed, not in fear, but in desperation, because now they remembered something they had spent eons trying to forget. Harmony hurts them. I left the tomb in silence. My ship was waiting. But it felt different now. Lighter, eager, its shape shifting to match my intent. It hummed beneath my feet, waiting for the first note. I gave it one. The first note of awakening. And we soared. The return to Sirelon was chaos. I arrived in orbit to find half the sky burning. The Council had come back with everything. Dozens of warships hovered in the upper atmosphere, dumping drones and thermonuclear payloads into the ruins below. Gnawed screams echoed across the airwaves, drowned beneath the rumble of collapsing temples. They weren't here to contain anymore. They were here to wipe it out. I didn't ask for clearance. I descended straight into the chaos, the ship parting clouds like they were curtains. I landed in the heart of the battlefield, right where the first tower had stood. It was rubble now, shattered crystal, bloodied stone, but the earth still hummed. Janeth was there. She was injured, limping, holding her side, but alive. When she saw me, she didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just listened. Because the second hymn was already vibrating the air around me. The Nal, broken and scattered, began to crawl from the ruins. Their eyes widened. Their voices, weak and hoarse, began to rise, one by one, note by note. Until they joined the song I hadn't even realized I was singing, the hymn of the second dawn. The Council's ships reacted violently. Energy readings spiked. Alarms rang across open channels. They knew what it was. The second hymn wasn't just memory. It was a reboot, a calling back of everything the Vari had lost, of every choir silenced, of every guardian buried under the dust of cowardice and fear. And the galaxy was responding. Temples lit up across dozens of systems. The last choir rose from cryo-silence in the Shikari drift. The flame-born reeds ignited again over the waters of Suthi. Even the trees on Riveka began to bend toward the stars, humming. And the dissonant, they screamed louder than ever, because their silence was being broken. I raised my hands, not in anger, in invitation. "Sing with me," I whispered. The Null answered first, then Janeth, then the air itself, the earth, the sky, the buried bones of forgotten kings. And when the council fired their weapons one last time, when their ships lit up the sky with fire and fury, the hymn responded. The blast didn't destroy, it transformed. Their weapons hit the temple and scattered like dust on water. Their ships glitched, shut down, and gently floated toward the ground, powered off like toys forgotten by children. And from that silence came the last note. Not mine. Ours. Human, Null, Vari, all species, all voices together, one last chord to remind the universe. We are not echoes. We are the chorus, and we remember. The High Council of the Zarnathi Empire convened under the great crystal dome of the capital world, Cthulhuun, their many eyes glinting with unease. News had traveled fast. Too fast. A patrol fleet had vanished. Not damaged, not crippled. Vanished. No distress signal, no wreckage, just gone. And the last transmission chilled even the oldest of them. "It's not one of ours," the Admiral's voice had said, panicked. "By the stars, they don't have ships like that. Humans don't—" Then silence. The message was repeated over and over again on every channel. Even now, the Council played it in the background, like a cursed lullaby. High Chancellor Varkiloon twisted his tendrils nervously. "There is no record," he hissed to the assembled dignitaries, "of Earth possessing this level of technology. Their last vessel class was a crude ion warp fusion hybrid. We monitored them. They are decades behind." "Centuries," corrected Lord Chodrex, his scales paling. "Their last known fleet barely pierced mid-range systems. Their planetary economy was still dependent on combustion energy." "So what in the 9 nebulas did they fly out there?" hissed another counselor. That was the question burning through every heart in the chamber. Because whatever it was, one thing was clear. It tore through a fully armed Empire fleet like they were paper dolls. Captain Rhea Morgan stood in the dim bridge of the Ghost Light, Earth's most classified vessel. Her knuckles were white on the command rail, eyes fixed on the swirling mass of stars that wrapped around the ship's stealth shell like water. They were deep inside Zarnathi space, and not a single system knew they were there. "Status?" she asked, voice low. "No pingback from the Empire's sensors," said Lieutenant Vargas from Ops. "Cloaking field is holding. Energy signatures fully masked. We're still a ghost." Ghostlight was the pinnacle of human desperation, a last-ditch black project built in the shadows of Earth's growing fear. Aliens didn't care much about humans, until they discovered how fast Earth was learning. The Empire's sudden embargo on Terran tech imports wasn't just economic, it was fear. They didn't want humanity catching up. They didn't realize they already had. The ship itself wasn't massive. It didn't need to be. Its hull was layered with photonic crystals that bent light and masked heat. Its drive ran on a quantum-entangled gravity loop, a human breakthrough so impossible, even Earth's own scientists weren't fully sure why it worked. But it did. And in field tests, it let Ghostlight move like nothing else in the galaxy. 1 second here, next second 10 light-years away. No trail, no wake, just gone. And it was armed with weapons that shouldn't exist. "They called us backward," Rhea said softly, pacing the bridge. "And that gave us time. Time to build without their eyes watching." "Time to get mad," muttered Vargas. The Ghostlight had just returned from its first test. The mission: intercept an Empire patrol near the Raiden Rift, observe, retreat, but the patrol locked weapons, warned them to surrender. They fired first, and the humans answered with fire the galaxy had never seen. Nanite-fused rail bursts, plasma-threading lasers, a wormhole compression bomb that turned half the patrol into dark matter foam. Now there were rumors spreading through the Empire's edge colonies, ghost stories, whispers of a Terran ship that came from nowhere, struck without warning, and vanished like smoke. The Empire had faced countless rebellions, millions of species, billions of battles. But this felt different. Because for the first time, they didn't know what they were fighting. And worse, they didn't even know where the humans got the tech. Back on Katelun, panic spread quietly through the highest ranks. The Empire had ruled this quadrant for over 3,000 years. No species had ever outpaced them once conquered. Earth had been under their observation since first contact, mostly ignored, mocked. Now that same planet had sent a vessel deep into their core systems, without detection, and destroyed a fleet. "What if that's not their only ship?" asked one of the younger counselors. That silence that followed was heavier than gravity, because none of them wanted to say what came next. What if humans had an entire fleet like that? What if they'd been preparing all along? Heya sat in her quarters, the lights dimmed to a pale amber glow. The hum of Ghostlight's quantum core was a constant, like a quiet storm beneath her feet. She didn't sleep much anymore. Not since the mission. Not since she saw the way those Zarnathi ships broke apart. Not exploded. Not scattered. Unraveled. It had been one strike, one weapon. The compression bomb had triggered a gravitational inversion that pulled the ships inside themselves like collapsing lungs. No flames, no wreckage, just silence. And yet, she didn't feel victory. She felt watched. The kind of watched that came from knowing your enemy wasn't dead. They were just quiet. Her terminal buzzed softly. A secure transmission blinked onto the screen. The face that appeared was older, lined with worry, with graying hair and eyes that had seen the darker parts of humanity. Admiral Harlan Bishop. "Captain Morgan," he said, voice low. "We have a problem." She leaned forward. "The patrol? They've declared it a terrorist act. They're blaming it on a rogue civilization, not us." Her brows furrowed. "Why hide it?" "Because they're terrified," Bishop said. "If they admit what really happened, they'll have to admit they lost control. And their entire rule is built on fear, on superiority." Rhea felt a cold knot tighten in her chest. "Then they'll come looking." "They already are," he said grimly. "We intercepted chatter on their long-range relays. They're pulling their border reavers from stasis. Haven't used them in centuries. Those things are illegal under every treaty. They wrote the treaties, Rhea. You think they care?" Meanwhile, in the outer ring of the Empire's border worlds, dread was beginning to rot the usual arrogance. On the planet Tsarka Prime, a strategic mining colony known for its obedience and wealth, local governors had begun fortifying defenses, not against pirates or rebels, but for something far worse. Rumors whispered through docking bays and cantinas like poisoned smoke. "They say the human ship can't be tracked. My cousin's fleet was out there, gone. No signal, no wreckage, just disappeared. Maybe it's not even a ship. Maybe it's a weapon. Maybe it's not even human." This last one had caught fire. The idea that humans, long dismissed as chaotic brutes with too much emotion and too little discipline, had evolved, or been changed, enhanced, turned into something else, something even the Empire couldn't predict. On Ghostlight, the atmosphere was shifting. Lieutenant Vargas looked up from his console. "We've got movement near Vecnar Station. Zarnathi Fleet Detachment. 12 ships. Old models but heavy." Rhea nodded. "Course?" "Right toward Earth's edge colonies. They're not here to talk." She turned to her crew. "Time to make our next move. We're not going to win this war by running." Engineer Zhao, quiet and intense, spoke for the first time. "You want to show them again?" Rhea nodded slowly. "No speeches, no broadcasts, just a reminder." She walked to the helm, placing her hand on the biometric pad, The ship pulsed under her touch. "Bring us to the flank. Full stealth. Weapon systems ready." It was like watching gods at war. Ghostlight appeared in orbit around Vecnar like a shadow turning into solid matter. The Zarnathi fleet barely had time to react before the first kinetic rail burst tore through their lead cruiser. No sound, no warning. Just brutal, surgical destruction. One by one, their ships blinked out of existence under Ghostlight's assault, until only one remained, spinning, powerless, comms wide open. Rhea patched in. A Zarnathi commander, bleeding from a temple wound, gasped into the feed. "What? What are you? You're not human." She stared into the feed, expression unreadable. "Oh, we're human," she said. "You just never really looked close enough." Then she cut the line. Back on Kataluun, chaos was blooming. Admiral Verthal slammed a claw into the war room table. "This is not a rebellion. This is a goddamn ghost war. They don't engage in diplomacy. They don't leave bodies. They just strike and disappear." Another officer, younger, voice shaking. "We can't find their shipyards. We can't trace their warp signatures. They don't use conventional star routes. We don't know how they're building this tech." And then the High Chancellor, with his voice like wet stone. "What if they're not building them here?" Silence. Because that was the deepest fear of all, that humans weren't just advancing, that humans had found something out there, something ancient, something forbidden, and it was teaching them, or worse. They were evolving into something the galaxy had never seen. Deep beneath the Earth's crust, in a facility so classified it didn't officially exist, Dr. Naeem Salvi adjusted his neural sync gloves and stared at the writhing hologram above the table. It wasn't Zarnathi. It wasn't human either. It was other. The pattern pulsed with impossible symmetry, geometry that shouldn't exist in 3 dimensions. It shifted every second, alive, like it knew it was being observed. He didn't discover it. He found it. Back when Earth's deep space probes hit the edges of the Andros Veil, they picked up something strange, a cluster of dead stars orbiting nothing. No gravity well. No visible core. Just absence. But then the signal came. A pulse, one that hit every quantum receiver on Earth at the same moment, even ones not pointed in that direction. A language. No, not a language. Instruction. Earth's scientists spent years trying to decode it. Salvi built Ghostlight from it. They weren't supposed to. But the message hadn't come with a warning. It came with an invitation. Admiral Bishop stood in the observation bay above Earth's hidden shipyard, where 2 new vessels shimmered under active stealth scaffolding. The air smelled of ozone and fear. He turned as the elevator behind him opened. Rhea stepped out, uniform crisp, eyes darker than before. "You said they're escalating," she said. "They just declared martial control over the Orion trade ring," Bishop answered. "That's 3 billion non-Zarnathi civilians under their boot." Rhea narrowed her eyes. "So they're cracking down before the panic spreads." "They're trying to, but the fear's already there. Even their own vassal species are questioning the Empire's control." "And Ghostlight?" she asked. He motioned towards the window. "It did what we needed. It proved a point." Rhea turned to face him. "Then let me take the new ones." Bishop raised a brow. "We haven't tested them." She smirked. "We didn't test Ghostlight either." That made him chuckle, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You realize what you're becoming to them, don't you?" "What's that?" "A myth. A weapon that can think. You've become their nightmare, Rhea." She didn't respond. She didn't have to, because that was the plan all along. Back in Zarnathi space, the Empire's grip was slipping faster than they'd admit. Entire border systems had gone dark. Not from war, but fear. Trading posts emptied, colonies fled, Even military installations were beginning to fracture. And always, the same stories followed in the void. A Terran ship that moved like thought. A captain who spoke only once before vanishing. And a weapon that broke the rules of physics. At the Central Archive on Lurx 5, Grand Historian Zeltar pored over ancient Empire logs, dusty with age and arrogance. He wasn't military. He didn't care for conquest. But something didn't feel right. The humans were advancing too fast. He found what he was looking for buried in a forgotten artifact registry. An anomaly discovered 5,000 years ago on a dead world. An artifact the Empire had deemed dormant and buried under classification. A cube. 6 sides, 12 points, same patterns, same shifting code. And it was exactly what Dr. Salvi had found in the Andros Veil. The humans hadn't invented this. They'd rediscovered it, and now they were using it. Ghostlight hung above a blackened moon, silent and still. No beacons, no life signs, just a single Empire listening post. Rhea stared at the surface, her thoughts clouded. "We're not here to destroy them," she muttered to herself. "No," said Vargas, "but they made that choice for us. They could have ignored us, let us grow. Instead, they tried to cage us." She nodded. "Time for another message." Within minutes, Ghostlight launched a packet, a burst transmission encoded in the Empire's own language, hacked into their long-range relay. A single phrase burned across the stars. "You were wrong about us." Back on Cthulhu, the message hit every screen, every relay, every secure military frequency. High Chancellor Varkiloon stood frozen as the words pulsed in red on the war room walls. The same message, over and over again. "You were wrong about us. You were wrong about us. You were wrong." The silence that followed felt colder than vacuum. Because for the first time in the Empire's history, they weren't feared. They were mocked. The humans had spoken, and they weren't running anymore. The Empire's core systems were no longer a monolith. Behind the shimmering towers and military parades, cracks had formed, deep ones. Fear didn't just gnaw at the edges now. It had burrowed into the bones of their civilization. On Zinara, a wealthy inner ring world known for its unshakable loyalty, protests began in hushed whispers. University students painted human sigils on walls in phosphorescent ink, symbols that glowed faintly at night before dissolving. It was treason, but it was also truth. "You were wrong about us." The phrase had gone viral across species, across systems, across cultures. Even among the subjugated races the Empire had crushed centuries ago, it was a call, a symbol, not of war, but of defiance. And the most dangerous kind of enemy the Empire had ever faced was taking shape. An idea. Captain Rhea Morgan stood inside the command deck of the Oblivion Crown, Ghostlight's younger, meaner sibling. This new ship didn't just cloak, it folded, ripped itself into the seams of space and stitched back together wherever it wanted. Its hull was etched with fractal armor born from the cube's original blueprint. Rhea still didn't fully understand how it worked. No one did. The cube had shown them. Not told, not explained, just shown. Zhao stood beside her, arms crossed. Ghostlight was stealth. "This one's a damn message." "That's the point," Rhea replied. "We're bait now? Number we're the storm." And they're about to feel the first wind. In the Empire's Senate chamber, chaos was a quiet affair. Votes were cast faster than debates could be held. Systems were granted emergency military lockdown without oversight. Entire planets were cordoned off on suspicion of Terran infection, as if ideas could be quarantined like disease. Lord Chodrex pounded his clawed fist onto the floor. "We are reacting like prey," he snapped, "to a primitive world." but no one replied. Because now, no one believed that anymore. A junior senator, barely old enough to shed his ceremonial feathers, stood up with trembling limbs. "What if they've found the makers?" The chamber fell into dead silence. It was forbidden to speak of them, the ancient ones, the species lost to time, the source of so many scattered ruins and forbidden relics, like the cube the humans had found. The Empire's official position was denial, but every elder in the room knew the truth. The makers had left something behind, and maybe, just maybe, the humans had been chosen to inherit it. Back in Sol space, Admiral Bishop received the latest intercepted transmission from deep inside the Empire. His analysts stared at the contents, pale and quiet. He read it twice before muttering, "They're scared." "Of Ghostlight?" one officer asked. "No," Bishop said, "of what we might become." He opened a new priority file, keyed in a secure code, and titled the operation, Inheritance Protocol. It was time to escalate, not with destruction, but with proof. If humanity could strike fear, they could also inspire. In the colonies near the rim, something beautiful and dangerous began to grow. A multi-species rebellion, Zarnathi dissidents, reptilian slaves from the Drotan mines, the aquatic Kelith from the drowned cities, all of them united not under a flag, but a sentence. "You were wrong about us." They had seen the Terran ships, not just Ghostlight or Oblivion Crown. There were more now, smaller, faster, leaking into every corner of the Empire's hold. Sometimes they attacked, sometimes they only watched, but they were always there, and their silence screamed louder than the Empire's banners. On board Oblivion Crown, Rhea received a private comm burst from Dr. Salvi himself. No face, just his voice. "The cube's map just expanded," he said, excitement barely restrained. "There are more sites, scattered across the galaxy, some in Empire space." She leaned forward. "What kind of sites?" "Like the one we found in the Veil. Dormant, locked, waiting." Her fingers curled into fists. If the Empire found them first. "Send coordinates to Bishop," she said. "We move tonight." "And if they try to stop us?" Rhea's voice was calm. "Then they'll see the part of us they really should have feared." The planet's name had been forgotten by the galaxy, scrubbed clean from maps and archives. The Empire called it Sector W09, just a number behind a warning beacon and a "Do Not Approach" tag burned into official records. But buried beneath its volcanic surface was something older than Zarnathi history itself. And now humanity was here to claim it. Oblivion Crown dropped out of fold space in total silence. No ripple, no trace. It hovered in low orbit like a phantom, scanning the mountain ranges below for the buried signal Salvi had traced from the cube's latest pulse. "Got it," Zhao announced, eyes wide. "Trilat pulse buried under 300 meters of obsidian. Same frequency as the Veil cube, almost calling to us." "Landing team, gear up," Rhea ordered. The crew moved with practiced efficiency. No wasted motion, no doubt. They knew what this mission was. Not just exploration, validation. If the Empire found the site first, they'd destroy it, bury the evidence like they'd done before. But if humanity reached it, the galaxy would know the truth. The Terrans hadn't stolen power. They were the rightful heirs. Down on the surface, the air was acidic, thick with ash. Their suits filtered most of it, but it still clung to their skin like guilt. They trekked down into a canyon split wide by ancient seismic upheaval, flashlights flickering against jagged walls. And then they saw it. A doorway, etched into the rock like it had always been there. Not Zarnathi, not human. Older. The markings glowed faintly as Rhea approached, her hand brushing against one. The door didn't open. It recognized her. With a soft vibration that hummed through the soles of their boots, The wall melted backward like liquid glass, revealing a tunnel of black stone laced with silver veins. Inside was silence. Not the absence of sound, the presence of something watching. On Cthulhuun, alarms screamed through the central command towers. The Empire had picked up a subspace pulse, an echo, originating from Sector W09. They knew what it meant. Someone had activated the tomb. Admiral Verthal cursed under his breath. "Send a fleet, immediate launch, nothing in or out." Lord Chodrex narrowed his eyes. "If the humans open it, we won't be able to deny it anymore." "They won't live long enough to tell anyone," Verthal growled. But in his gut, he knew. It was already too late. Inside the ruin, the air grew warmer, charged. Salvi's voice came through the comms, whispering in awe. "It's an archive," he breathed. "Look at the walls. They're alive." Rhea turned slowly, staring at the flowing patterns etched into the stone. They moved like rivers, spiraling and shifting in perfect sequence, like language, like memory. In the chamber's center stood a pedestal, and hovering just above it, a cube. Not identical to the first. This one shimmered gold instead of blue, but the design was unmistakable. Zhao stepped forward, carefully raising the containment field. "Wait," Rhea said softly. The moment she spoke, the cube pulsed, and then her neural comms lit up with a flood of data, not words, not images, feelings, fear, survival, rage, hope. And then a question, echoing deep in her brain like it came from inside her own thoughts. "Are you ready to finish what we started?" She stepped closer, heart pounding. "We don't even know what that is." The response came instantly. "Then you are ready." The cube sank into her hand like light wrapping around bone. The ruin shook. The walls blazed with light. They hadn't just found technology. They had triggered a wake-up call. In orbit, Oblivion Crown detected incoming threats, 12 Zarnathi destroyers, emerging from fold space in tight formation. "They're here," Vargas said, fingers flying across controls. "Engines hot, shields charging." "Time to go loud," Rhea replied, emerging onto the bridge in her exosuit, the golden cube tucked under her arm. Her voice was steady, her eyes gleaming with something new, something old. Vargas blinked. "Are you glowing?" She just smiled. "Target lead ship, fire the arc array." Ghostlight had been a scalpel. Oblivion Crown was a sledgehammer. The first beam carved a hole straight through 2 cruisers before they had time to blink. The Zarnathi formation scattered, scrambling to adapt. But Rhea was already ahead. She moved the ship like she was thinking through it, like it was part of her. Zhao looked up from the systems panel, eyes wide. "The cube, it's syncing with the ship." "No," she said, her voice distant. "The ship's syncing with me." From his command chair back on Earth, Admiral Bishop watched the live feed. He saw the ships vanish under Oblivion Crown's fire, saw Rhea move like a god among stars, saw the second cube pulsing in her hand. Then the comm feed lit up again, from Salvi. "Sir," he said, breathless. "I was wrong. There aren't a few sites." Bishop leaned forward. "How many?" Salvi swallowed. "Dozens, no hundreds, all across the galaxy, buried, sleeping. And now? They're waking up." News spread like plasma fire across the stars, silent, fast, and impossible to contain. Entire star systems picked up the subspace wave emitted from the second cube. A resonance not just felt by sensors, but heard in the minds of anyone near it. A kind of psychic chord that stirred something primal in the oldest species. Not fear, not awe, recognition. The galaxy began to realize the horrifying truth. The Empire hadn't built civilization. They were squatting in the ruins of something much older. And now, that something was waking up again. and the ones awakening it were human. On Cthulhu, the Empire's panic mutated into paranoia. Every ambassador, every counselor, every loyalist vassal interrogated. Loyalty screenings were conducted with invasive psionic probes. Dozens were executed on suspicion of Terran influence, though not a single one had ever seen Earth. It didn't matter. The Zarnathi High Command no longer cared about truth. They cared about control. But they couldn't stop the whispers. Not anymore. Because now, even their own people had started asking the forbidden question. What if the humans were chosen? Rhea sat in the command chair of Oblivion Crown, the cube glowing gently beside her. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Didn't need to. Since touching the artifact, her mind was sharper. Focused. Her thoughts moved faster. Her memory burned brighter. Her dreams? No longer hers. She'd started seeing things, visions that didn't belong to her, cities carved from living metal, machines with skin, stars being birthed, manipulated, designed. Not dreams. Memories. Not just from the cube, from the makers. They weren't just engineers. They were architects of reality. And they had vanished not because of war, but because they had passed on a legacy, a dangerous one, a test. And now Rhea could feel it. She was the key. In the Drotan wastes, a slave species long assumed docile began rising. Quietly, at first. Shipyard workers refused to load Zarnathi carriers. Pilots rerouted shipments to unknown locations. And then, on the mining moon Varesh 6, an entire garrison surrendered to a rumor. "They say she walks between light," one soldier whispered. "She moves like the wind, strikes like the dark. She's not just human, she's what comes after." And everywhere the rebellion bloomed, the same message was painted in ash, carved into metal, etched in blood. "You were wrong about us." Dr. Naeem Salvi stood before a massive holomap inside the Earthside Maker archive, staring at the sheer scale of the cube network. 211 sites confirmed, he told Bishop through a secure link. 29 already showing signs of activation. It's cascading. We triggered something far bigger than just knowledge. Bishop leaned in. "Explain." "These cubes, they're like keys, but not for weapons." "Then for what?" Salvi turned. "For evolution?" There was a pause. "You're saying the makers weren't just teaching us tech?" "No," Salvi said. "They were preparing us to replace them." On board Oblivion Crown, alarms lit up. "Fold breach, rear quadrant," Vargas shouted. "Zarnathi Interceptor Fleet, 25 ships, all advanced stealth grade." "They're not running this time," Zhao muttered. "They're here to finish it." Rhea stood, her hand resting on the cube. She didn't reach for weapons. Instead, she opened a channel. To everyone. Empire, allies, rebels, and unaligned systems alike. The screen crackled, then lit up with her face. Calm, human, glowing with a subtle light from within. "My name is Captain Rhea Morgan," she said. "I pilot the Oblivion Crown. I serve no empire, no throne, no ancient war." She paused, letting her voice settle like thunder. "I serve the future." The cube pulsed, sending ripples across every ship in the system. "You feared us because we were unpredictable, chaotic, fast. But that's why the makers chose us. Because we grow, because we adapt, because we don't stop." Zarnathi ships hesitated, weapons held, unsure. "And if you try to erase what we are, if you think fear will cage us again," Rhea's eyes hardened, "then come see what happens when humanity evolves." On Cthulhu, the High Chancellor watched the transmission in silence. And for the first time, he didn't feel rage. He felt something worse. Obsolescence. Because in that moment, watching the human woman speak like fire through the cold void of space, he realized something the Empire had refused to admit for 1,000 years. They were no longer the future. They were the past. The Zarnathi fleet hung in space, weapons charged, engines humming with power, but none of them moved. Captain Rhea Morgan's message still echoed across the system, across channels thought to be private, encrypted, invisible. Now every Zarnathi pilot, every command deck officer, every political envoy had heard the truth. And the silence that followed wasn't just confusion, it was hesitation. Then the feed cut, and Oblivion Crown dimmed, its hull absorbing starlight, vanishing like a shadow blinking out. The fleet scrambled. No one knew where she went. No one ever did. But one thing was now carved into their minds. The humans were not running, they were leading. Admiral Verthal slammed his clawed hand onto the war table, sensors flickering and zooming across the system feed. They had us in range, he spat. They could have struck again. They didn't need to, muttered General Keelar. They showed us they could. That's worse. And the soldiers, Verthal hissed, his voice cracking. I want charges filed against any commander who hesitated. No, came the Chancellor's voice, low and brittle. Let them go. Verthal's eyes widened. What? The High Chancellor stood from his dark throne, bones slow, breath shallow. It's over, Admiral. We are no longer the center of this galaxy. Then what do we do? Verthal whispered. The Chancellor looked out into the void, voice barely audible. We survive it. In the shadows between stars, Ghostlight re-emerged, silent, spectral, and sharper than ever. Its systems had evolved, connected now to the cube network like a neuron in a greater brain. The ship was no longer bound by thrusters or engines. It drifted between folds of time and matter like a ripple through fabric. Rhea had sent it on a mission. It wasn't to attack. It was to awaken. And on over 20 maker sites across the galaxy, Ghostlight arrived like a whisper, igniting dormant cores, unlocking libraries of knowledge buried beneath rock and ice and forgotten cities. In its wake, silence was broken, and the stars began to sing. Back on Earth, Salvi stared at his latest readings, his heart pounding like a drum. They're responding, he said aloud. All of them. The cubes are sinking, not just to us, to each other. Bishop leaned in. What does that mean? Salvi looked up, eyes wide. We're not just activating tech anymore. We're bringing a network back online. A civilization-wide lattice, possibly sentient, possibly alive. You're saying the makers are waking up? No, Salvi said slowly. I think we are the makers. Bishop's breath caught. What? The designs, the DNA alignments, the neural resonance in Rhea. She's not just syncing with the cube is syncing with her. He stepped back from the holomap, hand shaking. The makers didn't disappear. They became us. On a dead world at the edge of the Andromeda Breach, a storm of ash swept across a blackened city made of metal and bone. And beneath it, something stirred. A construct buried deep inside the planet's core activated for the first time in 10,000 years. Its heart glowed with the same golden light now carried by the Terran ships. It began to hum. The melody carried into space, reaching out across the void like a call home. Rhea stood inside the Maker Chamber, this time on a new world. Aurelia, once considered barren, now revealed to be a vault. The chamber reacted before she even spoke. Walls split open like petals. Holograms bloomed into patterns, languages layered upon languages, and in the center, a final message appeared. Not from the cubes, not from the past, but from herself. A mirrored projection, her own face, but older, stronger, colder, and it said only 3 words. You were warned. The cube in her hand pulsed violently. Zhao flinched. Rhea, what the hell is that? She stared into the hologram, and the truth hit her like a warship. "These weren't just gifts," she whispered. "These were tests." She looked around the chamber, the shifting walls, the glowing pillars. Not every civilization passed. Far away, in the heart of Zarnathi space, their last gambit was unfolding. A hidden vault, sealed even from their own commanders, was being unearthed. Project Dreadmother, a weapon built in secret designed after the Empire first discovered fragments of Maker tech long ago. They'd failed to replicate it, but they twisted it, engineered it into something unstable, something horrifying. And now, in a final act of desperation, they would unleash it. "They think they're the Makers reborn?" Vertal hissed. "Then let them meet what we made in their image." Behind layers of plasma shields and failsafes, something screamed awake. Half machine, half Maker, all rage. The stars were too quiet. From the edge of the Andros Veil to the burning rings of Calthera Prime, ships stood still, Empire, Rebel, Terran, not firing, not retreating, just watching. Because something new had entered the void. Something wrong. Dreadmother, a creation that never should have existed. Not built, but cobbled together from stolen Maker fragments and Zarnathi ambition, merged with organic material, bred in a tank of fear. It wasn't a ship. It was a being. Its hull was alive, stretched over bone and steel, twitching with electrical spasms. Weapons grew from it like tumors, pulsing, leaking radiation. It had no bridge, no crew. It was the crew, and it had one purpose: eradicate anything that bore the spark of the Makers. Inside Oblivion Crown, Rhea stared at the incoming mass on the sensor array, her chest tight. "It's not just big," Zhao whispered. "It's loud." The sound wasn't noise. It was pressure. It vibrated inside their skulls, scraping against their thoughts like claws on glass. "Biometric scans off the charts," Vargas added. "It's broadcasting hate like it's a damn war chant." And then it spoke, not in words, in memory, 1,000 screams, 1,000 species wiped out in Empire conquests, executions, chemical cleansing, entire moons glassed and forgotten. It fed on pain. It was born of pain, and it wanted to end them, all of them. Back on Earth, Salvi's team watched as the Maker lattice began to shudder. The cubes across the galaxy pulsed erratically, like they were in distress. "It's disrupting the network," Salvi said, voice rising. "Like a virus, a false echo." Bishop leaned over the console. "Can we stop it?" Salvi hesitated. Number, but she might. Rhea opened the cube in her hand. Not physically, mentally. She reached into it like it was an extension of herself. And the cube reached back. The chamber around her flickered, then collapsed into light. She stood alone, suspended in nothing. No ship, no suit. Just stars and silence. Then another figure appeared. Her reflection again, but clearer now, older, wiser, not just a version of Rhea. The first Rhea, the original, the one who had failed. "I see you've come further than I did," the reflection said. "But this is where we always fall." "No," Rhea said quietly. "Not this time." "You think you're different?" "I'm not here to be different," she said. "I'm here to finish it." The reflection smiled and vanished. And Rhea woke up, eyes glowing, pulse steady. She was ready. Dreadmother fired first. A blast of pure entropy ripped toward Oblivion Crown like a tidal wave of death, curving space behind it. Any normal ship would have been torn apart, atoms undone. But Rhea was the ship now. She moved with thought. The blast missed. Then she struck back, not with cannons, with resonance. The Maker lattice behind her shimmered, every cube, every ruin, every site connected to her pulse. They began to hum in unison, a single note, soft and pure, swept through the system like a siren's cry. The Zarnathi fled first, then the rebels. Only Oblivion Crown and the Dreadmother remained, gods locked in orbit. The crown's wings unfolded, light flowing from every fractal ridge. And Rhea whispered to the stars, "I am not your mistake. I am your echo." The final strike didn't look like fire. It looked like stillness, Oblivion Crown folded into the Dreadmother's shadow, piercing its core, not to destroy, but to rewrite. The Maker Code flooded through it like a soul forced into a body that didn't want it. And the Dreadmother screamed. Rage twisted into agony, agony into clarity. For a brief moment it saw itself, what it was, what they'd done to it. And in that instant, it chose something it had never known. Peace. Then it shattered into dust and stardust, atoms blooming like a nova. Silence returned. The Empire's last weapon gone, its fleet scattered, its citizens no longer afraid of the shadows. And across the galaxy, new symbols began to rise, not flags, not borders, but cubes, lit in blue and gold. And at the center of them all, in the heart of the Maker lattice, stood Rhea, human, more. A final message was sent to every species, every system, encrypted not in code, but in emotion, in resonance. It needed no translation. We were never lesser, we were never late, we were always becoming. You were wrong about us, but now you have a choice: stand with us, or be left behind. In the dark halls of the broken empire, someone whispered, "They weren't supposed to win." And someone else replied, "They didn't win." They became.